So welcome everybody to this session. I am very excited about it as I'm someone who has worked at the intersection of M&E and digital health for a lot of my career. And it's a real pleasure to introduce to you all Kim Longfield, who is the founder and principal of the organization DataBoom. I love the name of your organization, Kim. Dr. Kim Longfield has more than 25 years of experience in global development, strategy, and research. And as I said, she's the founder of DataBoom, which is a research and communications agency that believes powerful insights can shape the world. Kim and her organization partner with others to evaluate work, design strategy, improve stakeholder engagement, and develop communications backed by evidence. She also designs measurement frameworks to generate insight and evaluate impact, and identifies practical solutions for organizations working in resource-poor settings. And prior to founding DataBoom, Kim has an illustrious career as the Director of Strategic Research and Evaluation at PSI, who I know many folks in attendance have either worked with or know of for sure. And Kim is the author of more than 50 published journal articles, reports, book chapters, and working papers. Kim, welcome. We're really excited to learn today about how to maximize data use through the power of upfront thinking. I still don't see. Oh,
she's
Ariel,
here.
She's here. Yay. Okay, so
Thanks.
Ariel's here. Just let me know when to turn it over to her. So.
Okay. I think now would be a good time to turn it over to her. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for the introduction. And thanks everybody for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So Ariel is with DataBoom, and she's going to help us with some polling questions. We have 3 of them to kick it off. Let's just make sure that it can work. So Ariel, if you can do the poll.
Yep, I think it's there in the polling tab if folks take a look.
Great. And do you know, Sarah, do the results just pop up automatically? Show results.
Sorry, so here you can show the results, or I can show the results, I think.
Okay, it'd be great if you show the results. I don't see that the results are showing. I just see the questions.
I think others can see them in the pane. So if you guys scroll down, you should be able to see the answer to do you have a strategic plan at your organization in the poll window.
I think you might have to answer the questions. There we go. Thanks, yep. Nina. I can see Nina in the chat. Yeah, you have to answer the questions. Okay, great. So this is the kickoff. Do you have a strategic plan at your organization? 70% of people say yes, 20% say no, and 10% say don't know. So that's interesting. And then among those, do you have a MEL strategy linked to your, do you have a MEL system linked to your strategy, monitoring, evaluation, and learning system? Yes, 60%, no, 40%. Okay, that's really interesting. All right, I think there was one more question. Are you learning from your MEL system? So that's the 3rd letter in MEL. Oh, there we go. Click yes. Seeing the results. Okay, 44% of people say they are learning, 22% say they aren't, and 25% say they don't know. Interesting, it's kicking up to 50%. Okay, so at least half of you aren't learning from your MEL system, so you are in the right place. Thanks for joining. As Sarah said, my name is Kim Longfield, and I am the founder and principal of DataBoom. And DataBoom is a communications and research agency, and we help people with strategy and decision making. So my session is on the power of upfront thinking today, ensuring that your digital solutions help you monitor, evaluate, and learn from your work. By the end of this session, we want you to spread the gospel. We want you to let people know about the investment in upfront thinking and how it's critical before building a monitoring, evaluation, and learning system. And then we want to leave you with some tools as well that will help you guide your upfront thinking and maximize your data use and learning. So what is upfront thinking? Upfront thinking is the advanced planning you need to do to identify the requirements of your MEL system before rushing to build. A strong MEL system should help decision makers make deliberate choices about how to achieve programmatic objectives. What happens when upfront thinking is missing? These are the 2 biggest problems that we see with our clients, is that measurement is disconnected from strategy. Sometimes people don't have a strategy. The majority of you say that you do, so that's great. But then what happens is the strategy has them doubling their impact over a certain period of time, or reaching 100 million people on an annual basis, and they don't know then what they're supposed to do to measure it. So we help with that. We're going to show you some of that. And then instead of really aligning strategy with measurement, people then rush to build a data solution like dashboards because they want to display results. And I think that people, like with research, often hope that the answers will emerge from the dashboards, but that can't happen. It can't happen unless you design them with the intention of learning from them and you understand what you want to know. Not investing in the upfront thinking leads decision makers astray and wastes valuable resources. And then you're often in a position where you can't show your impact. And a lack of upfront thinking means that the L is missing from the MEL. It makes learning impossible. So what does upfront thinking entail? For us, it entails these three phases: design, build, use and learning, and then we have some tailored tools that we use with clients to go along with that. So at the design phase, you want to ask yourself these sorts of questions. First, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And then what's your role in the solution? Because there are lots of people out there with solutions, but yours should be unique. And the way you tackle the problem is sort of your secret sauce. It's the approach that you're going to use. Who's going to use the information? And how will you know when you're making progress? And then the three tailored tools that we have: theories of change. So a theory of change is a really high level conceptual piece of work, and it shows what the desired change is and all of the possible ways that you could lead to change, all the pathways. And it's a series of hypotheses. The logic model gets down into something more grounded, and we find that organizations can really wrap their heads around logic models because it represents the role that they're going to play in tackling that very large problem. So in a logic model, you zoom in on what your program will tackle, and it's a neat, orderly structure for a particular pathway of change, your role. And then we also have something called use cases. And use cases are really to help you identify from a user's point of view how a MEL system should respond to decision makers' requests. This is the tailoring component of it so that your decision makers at your organization can use your system. Today, we're going to look at the logic model and one other tool. So a logic model follows a basic pattern like this: inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact. You could flip it around and you can have an impact on top. And some organizations like to do that. We've found that organizations, it's easier for them to wrap their heads around the simplest things to ladder up into impact. So we usually start with the inputs, the sort of tangible things that go into a program. And then the activities are the second layer. So that's what you do. What are your projects within your program? What are your models? The outputs are the things that you would expect to come from those activities, and they're usually numbers. They're numbers of things like numbers of people trained, numbers of facilities opened, number of clinics who are certified, that sort of thing. Outcomes is really the heart of the problem that you're trying to solve. The outcomes are really about the behaviors and the change at the organization. And then the impact is the big change that you're trying to make, usually a change in health status, quality of life, something very high level. And so this is an example that we prepared for you, and we're going to share it, and there will be a template available to you at the end of the session as well. But I want to zoom in on this so that I can show you this particular example, so in higher relief. So this is a logic model. We just created this for fun, and it's about starting and growing a business. So inputs would be your new idea, some capital to get started, a business plan, including market intelligence, and talent, which is staff. So very tangible things. It's usually human and monetary resources. You can also have things like communication channels and information at this level too. Activities, core activities for somebody starting a new business are business development for sure. Marketing and communications, so people learn about their business. delivering and improving the product, because the product that you start off with may not be your final product, and managing talent. Outputs, the things that you would count from these activities, would be things like your new customers, your number of sales, growing your team, the improvements that you're able to make to your products. And then the outcomes, you'd want to see an increase in revenue. You'd want to see the quality of your product improve. You'd want to have customer satisfaction and talent retention, the numbers of employees that you keep on staff. You want people to stay with you. And then impact, we just put a few examples here. We're going to work through the one called market share, but other options would be something like innovation. Maybe you want to be the most innovative player on the market, or for most of us, we want to make the world a better place. And so, changing people's health status, improving educational outcomes, helping people live safer and healthier lives. These are the examples of impact. Okay, the build. So once you've done this sort of thing, and you have this idea of how your measurement is going to connect to your strategy, the change and the role your organization has in improving the world, you want to ask these questions before starting your build. Which measures are important to capture? What data sources do we have? How are they going to come together, and do they fit together? And what's missing? We have a good session tomorrow on this, where you'll see for MTV Staying Alive Foundation how we took a bunch of data sources that were disconnected and we brought them together and unified them in a platform so that the dashboard is seamless for the interface for the actual users. To feed those indicators and what you're looking at in your dashboard, you can use a tool called a log frame. This is a basic log frame, and it might be called a measurement framework if you've got Gates money, log frame for USAID. Often donors require this, and it's from a measurement standpoint, it's like your contract with the donor. It's what you're going to deliver, and it's your change. It's your change over time from X% to X%, or an improvement in something from X to Y. It's a planning tool that provides the overview of a project's goals, activities, anticipated results, and assumptions. And this is at the project level. And so this is how things actually come together through the indicators, the measures, the data sources, where you're going to get it, and the assumptions that have to be present in order for you to make progress up that chain. So let me get to the other example. And here's a sample log frame. It follows the same format that we use, the same example of starting and growing a business. So all we did was bring over this information that we looked at in the logic model, and we put some measures behind it. And so at the top, this is the one about market share. This is the kind of impact we want. It's the proportion of the total market share. We would get that sort of information from trade association data, and an assumption that might go along with that is that the market remains stable. An outcome that ladders up to that impact, and all of these outcomes, number 1, 2, 3, and 4, are working toward that larger impact, that larger goal of market share. And so the outcome for this one is an annual increase in revenue of X%, and you would define that. That would come from your P&L statements, from your bookkeeping and accounting, and an assumption I put there, like for us, it assumes that customers are willing to pay for our fees and our overhead. An output that then two outputs feed up into that outcome, the number of sales per year and the number of new customers per year. And we would get that information from our sales records and probably our customer relationship management system, our CRM. An assumption there is that donor funding or other people's funding is available within our domain so that we can get work. And then activities that would lead up to those outputs, that outcome, and that impact would be business development and annual marketing plans. And so we've just created this, and you can see it. We won't go through all of them, but sometimes you'll have assumptions, sometimes you won't. You'll always have some indicators for the important things that you want to measure, and you should define up front what those data sources are so you can figure out how's the back end of my data solution going to come together. What do I need to plan for? Moving back to the slides. So then use and learning. The questions to ask yourself here are we seeing the change we expect to see? How do results differ across audiences, geographies, or other important elements? What's working, what's not? And then as a result of that, what should we continue, stop, or change? And then finally, we can notice how digital data solutions don't come in the beginning of the process, they come at the end after you have answered these questions about the design, the build, and the use and learning. And you should capture your views into your dashboards according to your MEL indicators, so that you can have timely and effective decision making around them, so that you can see improvement. And again, you stop, continue, or change. And they can take many forms just depending on what your needs are. Here we've just displayed some, general trend lines, some graphs, some wheel graphs, a map. But again, these would come from what we just went through with the log frame, so that you're laddering up to impact. That's sort of your money view. And then what sorts of outcomes lead up to the impact? What sorts of outputs are associated with those outcomes? And then what are the activities that you're doing? Okay, and the value of upfront thinking. The value of investing in the upfront thinking is that your measurement is connected to strategy, your digital data solutions enable decision making, and your programmatic objectives and impact are more likely to be achieved, and the L in learning is maximized for your MEL system. I think that is it. I don't have a clock. I can't see the clock on my computer. I think we have plenty of time for questions. I didn't realize I was going to get through that in 18 minutes.
Oh, that's great. We do have plenty of time for questions. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. I have a few of my own. So first of all, I actually didn't know your presentation was going to focus so much on log frames, and they are a personal favorite tool of mine. So I'm just sitting here fangirling about the log frames. I do find that not everyone likes them as much as I do. Oh. Shocker. And I think, frankly, that's because, and this is just my speculation, I'm not as much of an expert as you, but I think it's tough to have to examine the causal links between what you think is the right thing to do, right? Because we all come with our own expertise and our own background, and what results actually could logically come from those activities. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I'm wondering, as you go about your consulting practice and your work, what lots of people think of it, as you said, as just sort of like a donor tick box. Like, you have to do that, you have to make your indicators that you link to your M&E plan, and that's it. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to sort of like that process of facilitation, if you can get folks to engage with that log frame mm-hmm. development process, or if really, it does just remain kind of a donor tick box, and you work later to kind of engage on that. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I find that it ends up being a donor tick box. Like, somebody puts a lot of hard work behind the log frame, and then it doesn't really go anywhere, and then they panic when it's time for a reporting period, and that's when they fill it in. And I think, like you said, it's supposed to show the causal links. And what we've landed on is, I'm going to just go back up to my presentation, is often this is the critical missing part. So a lot of people start with like a really big problem that they want to solve and how they think the world needs to change to get there. And then they go to a log frame, and there's no bridge between them. And this is really nice when you work with people and you're like, okay, so what do you do? What are the inputs? Oh, well, we work locally. We always work through implementing organizations. And we always do quality assurance. And these are key components of the things that we do. And you start to capture it, and suddenly they're able to make the progression from big problems out there to our role in serving the problems, to then, if that's our role, then how and what are we going to measure? And then if you can take the log frame and use them to inform your dashboard views, then you wouldn't be sitting there at the semi-annual reporting phase or annual reporting phase struggling, because you would have dynamic dashboards that actually portray your results. But I find this to be like the missing middle, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to feature it as a tool at this conference, because we found that it really helps a lot of clients. We've done it with foundations, we've done it with implementing partners, and people are really able to articulate like the things they put in. We fund safe water systems in the following ways, and we expect and give these things. And then they're able to articulate what their activities are like and why they're different, and then what they expect to come from them. Outcomes are really, that's the money shot, right? That's the thing that most of us are gonna be able to shape with our projects. That's the harder one. Like, which behaviors are we gonna shape? Which spaces, among whom?
Definitely. And thanks for speaking to that. I'm glad I'm not alone. I think
I love you're a fangirl of log frames. I once hired somebody because she said, I log frame my life. I was like, wow.
There you go.
It's a lot of discipline.
We're few but proud. I think you kind of have answered Nicola's question in the chat, which is, what is the hardest part for organizations to come to the table with in that process?
Well, Sarah, I would actually say the hardest part for an organization overall, especially like senior management teams, global learning teams, is that alignment between this logic model and their big strategy, because they kind of have lofty ambitions, double our impact, reach this many people, reach this many families, but they haven't really thought about what it would take to ladder up to that change. How much of something would you need to do? What are your model activities? So getting especially senior leaders to align around what strategy means and then what really happens on the ground. I think that's the hardest part. After that, like after those things are defined, there are model indicators, as you know, that you can pull to say how you're going to measure them.
Yeah. Great question from Takandwa saying, what would you recommend if an organization had skipped this process of upfront thinking? Can you work backwards? That's a great question.
It is a great question. I think if you were to work backwards from the scenario I just posted, you would have to start at a set of dashboards that don't answer your questions. And maybe you could do that. You could say, why don't they answer our questions? We always call the backwards process the starting at the end, like, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to do? And then you work backwards to all the things it takes to get to the point of what you want to do. So I don't know, Takandwa, if you have a set of digitized dashboards right now, some sort of data platform that's not responsive to your needs, perhaps you could back up, look at the logic model and create a logic model. We're going to provide you with one. Ariel will share the links. It's on our website. But just think about, what are the key inputs and map it out. And then just look at the disconnect between like this strategic map and what you're currently displaying. And then then go to your log frame and figure out what are the data sources that we would need to capture that information and how could we fix the system that we've got.
And thanks, Ariel, for dropping that link in the chat. Jess Garrigan has a question actually that I'm interested in because I've had to deal with this before in managing projects. What is the best way to revisit a log frame in the case of catastrophic or large contextual shifts, such as COVID, cyclones, et cetera, that might change the causal links in our ability to complete activities? I've dealt with this before in Ebola, or with the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, and it is quite a shift. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks, Jess, for that. You can count on a friend to hit you with the hardest question. I think what I would do is I would go back to the logic model and I'd look at the activities because that is really tangible for folks. So, for example, Jess and I are going to present with our colleague Yvonne tomorrow on MTV, Staying Alive Foundation. During the COVID pandemic, they actually shifted activities to go online more, to social media instead of broadcast. And they actually did Alone Together, like a special series on COVID to help people with mental health issues and other things that were coming up as people were stuck at home during the pandemic. Then I would say, well then, okay, so this new activity, how different is it from everything else that we currently do? Does it require different inputs? What are the different outputs that we would expect? So in that example for like MTV Staying Alive, they would probably expect to see still number of views. They want to see a spike in the broadcast, in the views, in the engagement, and then compare it to other things that you've been doing. So the outputs and the outcomes might not be that different, but you might have to adjust it for the health status that you're looking to achieve or the health behavior that has to improve, in order to get an improvement in status. But I think starting at the activities and then revisiting this sort of map would help. because I think people have a sense of what they need to do when they need to pivot, but then they need to impose some logic on it. Like, what would we expect this pivot to do?
Really good point. It kind of relates to, Nicola has a question as well. Have you had any organization that has tried to incorporate an ROI or return on investment metric into their measurement framework?
Yeah, I think, Nicola, we haven't had anybody do it yet, but we have a lot of people who aspire to do it. Some things that we aspire to do with dashboards would be to integrate some of that. It would involve integrating your evaluation often into your dashboards, right? Because in order to show a return on investment, that's often a cost effectiveness measure, and you need to show that a program is effective first. And a lot of dashboards just monitor, how much of something is somebody getting and what are they taking away from it? Are they understanding? Are they responding? Are they engaging with it? But if you could integrate your evaluation into a view, and Jess and I have talked a lot about this, like, would it be a static view so that people could keep their eyes on what is effective and what is needed in a program? And then you could integrate ROI into that. And maybe what you do is you capture it, ROI, you don't do very regularly, but maybe you have it on an annual, semi-annual, something basis, and you capture it in your dashboards, and then maybe you monitor the other things that are driving the cost, and seeing if you think it'll go down or go up based on how much of things you're doing for a certain cost. We haven't done it yet, but a lot of people aspire to it. A lot of people are just getting started. They're kind of here in this space.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And some of my other hats at BIO, I work on PEPFAR, and they're really doing a lot to take expenditures and budgets and align that with results. And I think you're right. It's not even at the level of cost effectiveness yet. It's just, can we even display side by side results that we're getting along with costing? But it's a start.
Yeah.
Yeah, exciting. I guess I have a question around, even if you have a team that is able to work through a logic framework, a logic model, they have a great M&E plan, they have this dashboard that stems from their logic model, sometimes our logic models don't hold up. And like the assumptions we bring to that process, what we're seeing, even if we went through the correct process, is not what we expect and maybe isn't measuring what we need to measure. And I wonder if I have struggled, I think, on especially sort of the types of like large USAID funded 5-year projects. Once you make that log frame, it's there for 5 years. Have you ever worked with folks where they've been able to iterate or adapt over time, sort of this framework, and thus be able to adapt the way that they're using that data?
Yeah, I think that the adaptation, a lot of work is just driven by the donor, right? What you have money to do, what your agreement is with the donor, and their flexibility. Some donors are more flexible than others in terms of pivoting and learning. Especially, we found that foundations, and when people work with their own money, there's more freedom for that. Because what you could do if something's not working, and it's apparent in your dashboards, your trends are going in the wrong way, then I would revisit the activities and the models. What are we doing? Because it's not having the expected outputs and outcomes. And so how would we adjust? How would we pivot? How would we tinker? Do we need to stop some things? And that's also where your evaluations and incorporating those would come in too, because if you were able to integrate the exposure that people have to a program and the things that it's good for changing, and then you align it with this and you keep track of what things are we changing among our target audience, I think that would help a lot. But yeah, you often get locked into a measurement framework or a log frame, and that's a shame, because hopefully you would have a donor or a support system that would allow you to pivot and change.
Well, thanks so much, Kim. I think we've exhausted our questions in the chat. Really robust discussion here, and thanks everyone for all the really great questions. I'll see if there's anything final. Looks like that's all we have. People are saying, great question, we're ready to do ROI metrics. So everyone's very energized and ready to go. But thank you very much, Kim, on behalf of the Global Digital Development Summit. It was really a pleasure to host this session, and yeah, I'm going to be following up with you to sort of geek out about log frames for sure.
Great, thanks, Sarah. I guess it's the gift of time.
It is a gift of time, and I think it's great because actually there are some other breakout sessions that are still going, although others are wrapping up, it looks like, so folks can drop into those if they're interested. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Don't forget to access the tools that are in the chat there. So Ariel's put those in there. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, Monica. Bye.